Good afternoon, everyone listening. You're welcome to today's episode of the Tech Talk Show. So today we're going to be moving a little bit away from the core tech topic, and we're going to be talking corporate training today, or corporate learning, I should say. So the topic for today's episode is the future of corporate learning, tools and strategies. And I have Kyle Rosenthal with me on the show today to walk us through today's topic. Carl is the Director of Business Development at LOD, that's Learn on Demand Systems. And Carl is a 13-time MVP, Microsoft Most Valuable Professional. So you're welcome on the show with me this afternoon, Carl.
Hey, thanks, Kazim. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. So I'm going to let you quickly introduce yourself again. I'm sure there must have been stuff that I left out, so I'm going to allow you to do the reintroduction again, and then we can jump right in. So it's over to you now, Carl.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So my name is Kyle Rosenthal. I'm based out of Brisbane, Australia, but work for Learn on Demand Systems, so we're a worldwide learning company, worldwide learning or hosted learning environment company. And Corey, who runs the company, will hate me for saying the saying in that way. So, you're right. I'm a multiple year Microsoft MVP. I'm also this year 20-year MCT as well, so Microsoft Certified Trainer for 20 years. I've been in the IT industry now for just over 27 years. But as I say to quite a few people when I give that introduction and then I say, but of course, really a lot of that from a technology perspective only really counts for the last 3 or 4 years now, because everything moves so fast that we go, yeah, like it's great that I've been around for a while, but it's really just the most recent sort of future, the most recent past that actually counts. So yeah, but I've been in the industry for a while. I've seen a lot of changes as they've come, dealt with adult learners. Now with all the things that are learning from home, I've dealt with child learners as well, and the challenges that come with both of them. So,
okay. So it's nice to have you on the show again, Carl. So let's start with this, Carl. What is the biggest shift that you've seen in the corporate learning space, over the past few years now? And now that we're in the time of COVID-19, so can you?
So I think the big change that's happened over the last few years is that, if we look at the way technology's gone, we used to have very static technology, right? So when I first started, in the industry, we would have a Windows server or Windows client. You would have the same thing that you would get trained up on, and you would hold on to that for 2 or 3 years. And as a trainer, it was nice and easy, because you knew that on day one when you went in, you clicked here, this is what would happen, because that's the way it had happened for the previous 2 years. Technology has started to move a lot faster. So because technology has started to move a lot faster, a lot of the cloud technologies and that sort of thing, I've run classes before where I've had 2 students sitting next to each other and seeing 2 different windows when they're actually accessing the same part. They're seeing 2 different experiences, and it's because one is sitting on a server that's been updated and one that hasn't. Yeah. So as a training method, as a technology, we need to be able to react to that, to stop going from having a methodical way of training where click here, click here, click here to be able to do something, to more having a knowledge transfer that tells people, that gives them the experience on how to do something that's going to adjust with time as well, so that then they have the tools to be able to do something today that even when something changes, they still have the same tools to be able to do it tomorrow. So that's one of the big things, is that we've then had to deal with that change, as well as that a lot of the corporate customers that I deal with have shied away now from having the big, 5-day courses that they take people away from, even before the days of COVID, that they take them away from a workplace and push them into a training center for 5 days straight. There's a lot of corporate customers that don't want to lose that resource anymore because money is so tight, because resources are so tight from a people perspective, that taking an administrator out or taking someone out of their role for 5 days and sending them away where they can't be contacted, then means you've got back at the corporate office where people are being left sort of high and dry. So that's two of the big changes. It's technology moving faster, and then it's also that we have a need now to have our resources of the people being able to be relied on more, if you like, and without having them to take away for that long extended periods of time, because it's like losing someone for a holiday or something like that. Even though obviously they're not going for a holiday because they're going to learn, but we're losing them as a resource for a week, so we need to backfill them or work out how their jobs are going to work. So yes, I think that's the two things, is the technology and then the resources being more sort of being treated more carefully, and time being a resource now.
So let's peep into the future for a bit now, Carl. Given the COVID-19 pandemic happening currently, and people have been forced to work from home and all of that, what do you see, as the future of corporate learning?
So it's interesting. I've had conversations with people and companies for the last 5 or 6 years, where I've been talking to people and saying, look, we need to, you can do things remotely. You don't have to send people to, you don't have to send everyone to a classroom and that sort of thing. And I've had a lot of pushback and people going, no, you can't do that. What are you crazy? That's, you have to be able to do that, and now there's a far more realization that people don't have to go to a place to do their job. And therefore, the same thing, they don't have to necessarily go to a place to do their learning either. And so I think that shift, like the COVID, is as horrible as it's been as an impact on on humans as in general. I think it's forced in the IT industry in general, but then in particular in the training industry, it's forced a realization that things can be done without sending people to a particular place. Even things like, say, for instance, the platform that we're using today, right? So using Teams, there's a lot more folk who now are used to the idea of how to be on a call. It used to be one of those things that you'd have someone join, you'd have a 30-person call or something like that, or even a 10-person call. The amount of times you'd have to tell people, okay, can you mute yourself? Can you do this? Whereas now everyone knows how to do that, right? And everyone knows how to do my kids, my kids know how to, they've had lessons from on a Zoom call, like they've had dance lessons or cello lessons on a Zoom call now. So that then means that sort of we've become far more used to the idea that we don't have to be in the same room as people. So therefore, that's changed the landscape a lot. That then means that training itself, we don't necessarily have to be in the same classroom. And I know trainers, trainers that I've spoken to who are even now, with things going back to normal in some places of the world, that they're kind of hesitant to the idea of going into a classroom. So you need to have a training method in that corporate world to be able to keep up with that. So whether that be and again, rather than having sort of the 5 days straight, having sort of a training method which breaks things up, because again, if we're doing
learning kind of thing.
Yeah, the micro learning. So how do you do that, right? How do you make sure that at the end of the time of doing the learning, you still actually have an outcome, right? And that's where what we've seen is a shift from being necessarily face-to-face like learning where it's just someone presenting, a talking head, for presenting for 5 hours or for 5 days a week, to now being more what we call experiential learning. So the idea of being able to take a piece of technology you want to train on, and rather than it being this that we're training on, like the large part, but breaking it down into a micro technology, right? And then it means that, say for instance, if I have a piece, if I want to be able to do skilling in a particular product, but a particular part of a product, then I can go and pick that information up. Like you look at the rise of things like the LinkedIn learnings, the lynda.coms, those sort of things, where you have the people going, rather than sitting on a large course, that they go and pick up just this piece of information. Like say technology wise, I want to know how to configure a DNS zone on a particular product. So rather than wanting to go and learn about all of the operating system to be able to get to that, I just go and pick up that little bit. But then again, how do you technology wise, how do we then make sure that we translate that I want to know how to do it to being able to prove that you can do it? And that's where the experiential learning idea comes in, that we go from having the large topic to having those small micro topics. And then so you can pick and choose your sort of way to be able to go, but then also having some sort of method to do some performance-based testing or that sort of thing to prove that you've actually done it, right? Which then leads on to then micro credentialing. So where you get a badge for, I know this particular piece of the overall technology, and if you get enough of those micro badging, then you get a large one that says, I know this technology. So.
Okay. So let's look at the training provider and the trainer relationship, or the partnership, I should say now. We both know the training business well, so we know it's not enough to only have a training business, but we also need to have quality trainers to be able to satisfy, the customers. And yeah, at the same time too, the training providers still want to be in control. They want to ensure that they have monitoring of what is going on in the class. The trainer is delivering the training correctly, and they want to be sure of good feedback. So given the current situation that we're in now, where most of the things are going on online, the training also online, is there a tool, or is there a platform, that brings all of these things, that we can leverage, that brings all of these things in one place? Do you want to?
Yeah, so there is like sort of, well, and I do a little bit of self-promotion, obviously, but from it, like just to sort of to rewind that a bit, from it, like the training company like relationship, I think is still just as important as it ever was. The trainers will generally, trainers are terrible business people on their own. Right, they're really good at what they do. So what they need is the idea of having the training company, or the training, the does the engagement with the end customer, right? And they're the ones that actually go out and they will sell the training, that sort of thing. And the trainers then are able to concentrate on doing the training. Now the methods have pivoted, right? Which is then mean that we're doing more things like this. We're doing more training online than we would in person. And even that brings its own set of challenges with getting people in place. Sort of because you're not going to a training center as a trainer, you've got to give even more of yourself to be able to prove the worth of being in this live sort of environment than, say, for instance, being in the recorded environment or something like that. So therefore, finding a way to be able to make the training interesting and engaging when you can't walk around the room and tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, how you doing, right? And particularly like the technology that we deal with, like, there's there's things that say someone's running a PowerShell script or a CLI command or something like that. If you're walking around the room, then you can see frustration on people's face, right? And you can see that there's a wall of red PowerShell, and it's like, that's not good. So therefore, you stop and you say, right, are you okay? Whereas, if we're trying to do that remotely, you've got to be able to have a platform that allows you to do that remote reaching into what they're doing and seeing what they're doing, and also guiding people then through the whole getting them on board and up and running, where when you can't see exactly what they're doing. So there are platforms out there that do that, and speaking personally, certainly the Learn on Demand Systems platform does do that. It enables the remote training. It enables that remote access from a trainer perspective. It puts things all in one platform, so someone signs into one platform, and regardless of what our delivery method is, so whether it's something like Teams or whether it's Zoom or whether it's a GoToMeeting or GoToTraining, having an inbuilt link that you don't have to send separately to someone. Instead, they can. If there's a link that says, or there's a button that says launch class, then they can launch that virtual classroom, guiding them through the hands-on component and having a platform to do that. And then, as I said, as a trainer, being able to reach in to their machines, their virtual machines, and see what they're doing, so that you can then guide them and see that wall of text and go, hey, hey Bob, that's I don't think you're doing that right. Do you need, do you need some help? And then trying to give some guidance. So yeah, so the Learn on Demand Systems platform does that, but there are other platforms that will do parts of that. We have, I think, one of the only full-fledged platforms that do it. But yeah, it's important to have something that gives you that ability to be able to control the student experience and to be able to support the student through their learning journey, so that they then feel comfortable about the fact that they're sitting in a virtual classroom and being guided through those things, and also being able to then give some value add afterwards as well. So one of the benefits of doing a virtual training environment is, if we're doing physical engagement, if we're doing physical training, and say for instance you have all the things you're working on living on a box that lives in the classroom, so all the virtual machines, that's them being in the classroom. At the end of the week, when the students pack up, we wipe the machines out, and they then stop learning basically from that environment. Using a virtual environment that's remotely hosted, then you have other benefits that after the Friday, when people go home, they can actually still do the learning, so they can still fire up the same learning environment. They think, oh, there was that topic that we did on Tuesday. I want to dive into that again and see if I can, try that again. So they can fire up the virtual environment, and depending on obviously how the course has been crafted, then actually just re-go into that same that same lab, which then means that they're in their own time solidifying in what they're doing. Particularly if you've got people doing overall, if they're doing certifications, that sort of thing, then it means that they can dive in and redo things as they need to. So.
All right, Carl. So I know you work with a company that offers some of the services that powers remote and online learning.
Yeah.
So yes. So has there been that, as a company now, Learn on Demand? Have you had to learn from feedbacks, maybe quick feedbacks, from your customers, that has had to change the direction with regards to how you render some of your services, especially now?
Yeah, so certainly, with when things first started going, looking particularly bad, when things first started, everyone being locked down, and as we're a US based company, but we've got folk that are in Canada, in Europe, and myself in Australia. So when we all started we all work from home anyway, but then when we weren't allowed to go outside, we realized, just how bad things were getting, right? And so as a company, one of the things that we did was we shifted our attitude, we shifted our way to be able to make sure that we threw all of our support in behind being able to support that shift, because we knew there was going to be a whole bunch of organizations who would be making the journey for the first time from being in-person training to now having to support that remote training. So yeah, like we've had prior to this, we would have about 100 changes or so a month on the platform of improvements, that sort of thing. They're all, some of them are small, some of them are large, just tweaks. During sort of the March, April, May sort of timeframe, particularly March was when things first started to kind of go, oh, this is going to be a major thing around the world. We shifted that a lot. So there's just, and some of them are big impact but small changes. So I mentioned before about say being able to put in now the things like the team, like being able to launch a Teams, like a Teams classroom or a GoToMeeting, that sort of thing. Prior to this, we had a really good deep integration with Adobe Connect. And so Adobe Connect, we had a much deeper, deep level integration in the platform. So one of the things that we did as a pivot was that there's a lot of people that started using Zoom as an example. So Zoom then published a whole heap of APIs that we could put in place. So our dev team got onto that, took those APIs, and then put that deep level integration into the platform. We changed things like, say, for instance, some of our LMS, like some of the LMS access, made it so that rather than billing for LMS access if you just wanted to use the LMS, then we used to charge per user for the LMS. If you didn't have any hosted environment, we charge for it. Whereas as an attitude from the company, it was like, well, we need to be able to assist folk to be able to make that pivot. So being able to have an LMS, or as we call it, rather than a learning management system, it's a training management system, because it does the whole sort of thing. Was doing that for free. So if you want to be able to run your training management, even if you're not running hosted labs, but if it's just organizing students coming into a virtual classroom, then you can do that on our platform at no cost. So but in order to make that happen, there's obviously scales that need to be put into place. There's investment that needs to make sure that as more people start launching the hands-on environments, doing the labs, that we're there to make sure that our infrastructure works. Now, the challenge that we had a whole heap of updates that we were just about to put into place in, say, for instance, our European and our US data centers, just as COVID hit. So we had a team that had flown from the US to the UK. They were doing, they were in the process of upgrading our data center, and it was literally the weekend that they did all the move from one data center into a larger location, that basically they had to down tools and fly home, because if they didn't, then they wouldn't be able to get home. So we had a lot of infrastructure that was in process that was just kind of stuck with no hands on it, because we couldn't get anyone to get hands on. So so we've had to think ourselves different ways to be able to grow and be able to move around that. So being able to expand out more of our use of some of the, like, rather than using our own metal for everything, we had a lot more demand for people to go into AWS and into Azure. So being able to work out how to make sure that happens in a repeatable fashion, and also making sure that then can happen in a way that costs can be controlled by the training companies as well. So yeah, like we had a lot of pivots on our side to make sure that that we were there to support our customers as they were, and then our new customers who then found us because they needed something else to be able to move through.
Okay. So another question is this: what do you think are the important consideration and strategies now for an organization that are looking to still train their staff during this time of COVID, or perhaps after COVID? What would your advice be? Would it be for them to set up their own LMS, or to subscribe to a third-party LMS, or what do you recommend? What exactly do you recommend?
So my recommendation there is that generally now, like with things like, say, for instance, an LMS, there is products that exist that mean that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, you'll find someone and something that has already done the hard yards, that's already done the learning to be able to get to that point. So you're looking for a provider who has a platform which is robust, which is flexible, so that you can then use it in any sort of modality. So whether it's in a classroom or whether it's cloud, like virtual classroom, so physical or virtual classroom, and being able to manage your student experience through that. So yeah, I like now. I certainly wouldn't go and create my own. You know, it seems like it's a set of resources that you don't need to invest in, because there's already investment that's being done for you. So it's a matter of finding the right fit, and as I said, like that sort of, finding the right scale for what you need to do. So yeah, so I wouldn't go and do my own, but I certainly would investigate LMSs or training management systems that already exist.
So what should, for the training providers now, what should they be doing, and also the trainers as well? What do they need to be doing right now that they can bring from this time into the time or into the world post-COVID, after COVID? What do you think they should be doing now?
So I think it's a time to look at what the student and what the, like, whether it's the student or whether it's the organization who is sending the student to training, what they're expecting of that time, of the time that the student is in place. So it's planning for, it's planning for the fact that this was going to go on. It's going to go on for a while. Like like in Australia, our neighbours New Zealand have come, they're already through the other side, but they're also very a unique sort of environment. They're very locked down. They're an island. They got onto it very, very quickly. But I think this is going to be with us for a while. So I think it's changed how we do business in general. I'm pretty sure for good. As in for a long time that this is going to be the new norm. So I think as a training company, you need to be prepared for the fact that students may not necessarily want to walk into a classroom again. You need so you need to work out what the best way long term is to be able to deliver that training. And it may be that you're going to have a mix to make things work economically, that you're going to have a mix of students that are in a class and students that aren't in a class, and how to manage that sort of process, like whether you put them into the same classroom. And I've got some customers that do that have even before this, they had a virtual classroom, but they had a physical classroom linked to it. So they would have cameras and that sort of thing, and they would have they would enable students to be able to be wherever they were, whether they were in the classroom or whether they were working from an office. And so that, as I said, I think that's going to be the new norm. From a student perspective, it's also a matter of being aware that the days of walking into a classroom and sitting with 20 other people are probably not going to be for a while, if at all. So being able to be used to this sort of modality, being able to do the remote learning, and from a student perspective, it is hard, because if you're sitting, say for instance, you're doing this from home, even if you're doing this from the office, right, there's always going to be distractions. We always hear the stories of the people that have, the people walk in and ask questions, or people walk behind them and that sort of thing. So it's a matter of of preparing an area where you can concentrate on the learning, because you still need to do that concentration. From where that relationship comes from, between the training, the trainers and or the training centers, the trainers and the students, it's also as trainers recognizing that doing things the way that we used to do it, of doing that 5-day course where everyone sits down and you do learning like this, or you do learning standing up in front of the classroom, that may also have gone. So we need to pivot as trainers to understand how we can best deliver it, so that we hold people's attention for an hour, 2 hours, and then maybe at that point we let them go and do the hands-on. We still monitor them, but we're not, going to have them sitting, in the room while we do that. So yes, it's the getting ready to go post-COVID. We also need to make sure that we're ready for it to be, for this method of training to be with us for quite a while. So.
Okay. Because of time, Carl, so I think I'm just going to ask you the last question. There are a few questions here in the pool. So maybe I'll ask you one more question and take one question from the pool, and then we can wrap up. Yes, so I want to quickly ask I want you to give your prediction now. A lot of the training companies now are embracing digital, the digital transformation train, if you will. So what do you predict, the future is going to look like? Do you think that, the self-paced online training that we see now will, take the place of instructor-led classes? What's your take on this? What's your prediction?
So I think that there will be a balance. If you'd asked me that same question about 2 years ago, I probably would have said, yeah, instructor-led training, it's gone. Because I saw a shift. There was a lot more of the pre-recorded virtual training that was happening. I think in the last year, and particularly actually the last 3 months, is that there's been more recognition that we can do things in a virtual training and still have a live component, so still have trainers live. And I think there is a big difference between learning something using a learning platform that doesn't include a trainer, like a trainer actually presenting, and going and watching a video and then going, yep, I know this. The problem is that we don't, as students, we don't know what we don't know. Right. So and so that's the challenge. And there was, I think it was one of the US leaders or something like that talked about the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown knowns. Right. So that we as students, we walk into a classroom and we engage with a trainer who can then guide us through the things that we don't know. We walk in with an expectation. I always start off a training course with, tell me what you want to get out of the course. And I'll make sure that we do that, but equally, we're also going to delve into not just that, and that's if I have a 5-day course and I have students that walk in and say, tell me what you want to get out of that course, they might have one topic they want to get out of it. Now, if you translate that into what that looks like, if it's a virtual training environment, where it's all pre-recorded, that the student will go and find that one thing. What they've lost out on is the other 100 things that we talk about during that time, and that's where those other 100 things may be equally as important. Now, not all of them may be relevant, but there might be things that they didn't know that as a trainer I can work their way through to make sure that they then walk away with something, knowing something that they didn't expect that they were going to know when they came into the course. So I think virtual training will, that pre-recorded training, will have its place, but equally I think the idea of that a physical trainer, a training person, a trainer actually presenting to a classroom, physical or virtual, that's not going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're seeing a pivot. I've seen a pivot back from a corporate world, from going and doing the training using the online platforms, to now actually engaging with the trainer. Yeah, so it's been a shift back. It was a big shift in one direction, but then I think there's been a lot of realization that that's not necessarily going to be the benefit. So long term. So I think long term, trainers are here to stay.
Good news for the trainers there.
Yeah, exactly.
So a quick one, Carl, before I let you go now. Francis is asking, he wants to know, from your past experience as a trainer, why do you think trainers are, he said, why do you think trainers are terrible business people?
Well, because a good trainer is passionate about the technology that they're training on. So what I mean by terrible business people is that we're focused on delivering content. We're focused on making sure that we keep up with the best technology, etc. So then that means that what comes along, like, the rest of the things that come along with business, so going and doing sales and, even collecting invoices and that sort of thing, right? That's not something that we concentrate on. We're naturally passionate about presenting. We're naturally passionate about making sure that learners have the best experience. So all the rest of the stuff that leads them, that leads the learners into the classroom, and that make sure that the bills get paid at the end of it, that's someone else's idea. Like, and there are plenty of independent, independent trainers that I know of who are good at that. But if you look at the majority of training companies, they engage with really good trainers, but they engage good trainers in to be able to do the training. And then they have like a business manager that actually looks after it, right? So yeah, so that's what I mean by that. Like, like the generally their passion is going to be in other places as apart from invoices.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's really a privilege to have you on the show with me today. So thank you so much again, Cal, for doing this, for sharing your knowledge.
No problems. Pleasure. Absolute pleasure, Kazim.
Okay. So thank you everyone for tuning in on today's episode of the Tech Talk Show with Kazim. So let's do this again next week, and we can keep the conversation going on social media as well. So please do continue to stay safe and healthy. So bye-bye.